Salvete omnes, this is I.46 commentarii de Bello Gallico liber primus, chapter 46. And Caesar writes, Dum haec in colloquio geruntur, Caesari nuntiatum est, equites ariovisti propius tumulum accedere, et ad nostros ad equitare, lapides tadaque in nostros coicere. So dum is a temporal conjunction meaning while. Usually takes the historical present, even if we're talking about a past action, to really draw the verb into the present, make it much more vivid, much more in the now. So dum haec. Haec is going to be from hic haec hoc. It's either the nominative singular feminine or nominative or accusative plural neuter. Here it's going to be nominative plural neuter. It's the subject of the verb geruntur. In plus the ablative colloquio, colloquium e neuter. It's a cum or con loquor, a talking with. You could say a conference, or you could say a parley. Geruntur, from gero, gerere, gessi, gestus. Geruntur is going to be third person plural, untur, present, untur, passive indicative, geruntur. So here's our historical present. While these things are being waged, managed, conducted, bandied about in the colloquio, in the parley. So while Ariovistus and Caesar are having their conference, their negotiations, Caesari nuntiatum est. Caesari, the dative of Caesar, Caesaris, masculine, Caesar. He's the indirect object of nuntiatum est, from nuntio, nuntiare, nuntiavi, nuntiatus, to announce or to report. This is the third person singular perfect passive indicative. So nuntiatum, that's going to be a neuter. So something, it, was announced to Caesar. What was announced? Well, what follows is an indirect statement. The thing that was announced to Caesar, the report, what was reported to Caesar. That, subject accusative equites, they did the infinitive accedere. And accedere is a present infinitive because it's happening contemporaneously with the head verb, the verb that announces or introduces the indirect statement, the nuntiatum est. So concurrently with it being announced to Caesar, the equites, the knights of Ariovistus accedere, are approaching. Cedo, cedere, cessi, cessus means to yield, to give way, or to, you can see the word cede. When you put a prefix, a preposition in front of it, that gives you the direction in which you move. The verb becomes moves from yield to mean move. And the prefix tells you in which direction you move. So accedere, to move ad, that's ad, towards. It becomes a C, what it assimilates to the consonant in front of it. So accedere, to move towards. The accusative direct object, tumulum. Notice it doesn't take an additional preposition, additional ad tumulum accedere. Just tumulum accedere seems to be fine. Propius is going to be the comparative of the preposition prope, which means nearby. As comparative, it means nearer, closer, not just close, but closer. The superlative, proxime, is closest, the nearest. So it was announced, reported to Caesar, that the knights, the cavalry, the horse of Ariovistus, meaning the dudes on horseback, belonging to the genitive Ariovistus, they are currently, Caesar, it was reported to him, approaching. That they were approaching the mound, that's the hill where Ariovistus and Caesar are having their colloquium, that they are approaching closer to the mound, to the hill, Et ad nostros ad equitare. And, look, here's ad. And ad is also prefixed to the verb. So ad equitare means to gallop towards. Ad equito, ad equitare, ad equitavi, ad equitatis. Here's ad plus the accusative ad nostros. This is the substantive use of noster, nostra, nostrum, an adjective. So it's towards our accusative plural masculine, our men. And they are galloping. It was reported to Caesar that they were currently in the process of galloping to our men. Lapides telaque. Lapides is linked with tela by the enclitic postpositive conjunction que, which goes here when you translate. So a lapis lapidus masculine is a stone or a rock, more accurately a stone. Tela, tellum e neuter, that weapons, projectiles, things that you cast. So it could be darts, javelins, spears. Just say weapons, assault weapons. In plus the accusative shows motion towards, into, or onto. In nostros, upon. So the stones and the weapons are being cast upon our men. Accusative plural masculine. They're galloping towards our men. They're horsing towards our men. And they are coicere. That means they are cum iaccio. They are throwing with force. Coicio, coicere, coieci, conjectus. Coicere. To throw with force, to hurl, to chuck the rocks and weapons upon our men. So while these things are being bandied about in the parley, meaning it's a fancy phrase for saying that they're arguing, it was reported to Caesar that the knights of I.46 were approaching nearer to the mound, galloping to our men, and casting stones and weapons upon our men. Well, Caesar loquendi finem fecit, seque ad suos recepit, suisque imperavit, ne quod omni notellum in hostes reieceret. So Caesar, your boy, in the nominative singular, he's going to be doing it because he's the subject. Loquendi, a gnarly nd thingy of loquor, loqui, locuta sum, to speak, to chatter, to prattle on. It's a less formal form of speaking than dico dicere. As a gnarly nd thingy, look around. Is it a passive periphrastic? That usually has a form of sum that works with it, but sometimes they omit sum. Yeah, it's not a passive periphrastic here. It's either a gerund or a gerundive, this gnarly nd thingy. And it doesn't agree with anything. It's working by itself. If it had an object, then it would be a gerundive, it would be an adjective. But this is a gerund, a verbal noun. Remember, a gerundive is a verbal adjective. They both end in iv. A gerund is a verbal noun, and it works alone. The gerund works alone. So Caesar, he fecit finem loquendi. Finem, a finis masculine, is an end. You usually see it as territory and boundary in Caesar, but here it means end. You can kind of see the English word finish. It's the accusative object of fecit. We have facio, facere, feci, factus, to make do. Third person singular, perfect, active, indicative. So the subject is Caesar. Caesar made an end. It's a more elaborate way of saying he finished. Loquendi, he made an end of speaking. This is a genitive gerund. He made an end of speaking. Caesar finished talking. Well, seque ad suos recepit, and he himself ad suos, to his own, recepit. Se recipio, notice that the que, the enclitic conjunction, is linking the se with what comes before. So first he fecit the finem, he made an end of speaking, and then he se ad suos recepit, suisque, and then he imperavit suis. So he se recipio, recepit, he took himself back. When the reflexive is used with recipio, it means to retreat. Literally to take themselves back, or to take himself back, to take the reflexive back, to retreat. He retreated, he withdrew ad suos, to his own. Suos, from suos is the possessive adjective. The su part goes with the subject, that's the reflexive part. Yeah. So Caesar, the subject of recapit, who is also se, the object of recapit. The os part, well, that's the substantive accusative plural masculine, standing in for a viros, so his own men. Remember, they went with bodyguards on horseback. So Caesar and Ariovistus kind of go forward alone, and then they talk. I think they're interpreters. And then the guards are on horseback, the Praetorians on the Roman side. They're a little ways off. But apparently the knights, the guys on horseback of Ariovistus, are approaching closer to the mount, galloping towards our men, casting stones and weapons upon them. Well, Caesar finished speaking. He retreated to his own, suis imperavit, and he impero, imperare, imperavi, imperatus. He ordered, third person singular perfect active indicative, he ordered, takes the dative, remember impero takes the dative. Suis, just like ad suos is to his own, suis is the object of imperavit, his own. It's the same guys as the suos, from suosaum. So it's dative plural masculine. And he commanded, because he is the imperator, suis, his own dudes, his own guys, his own men. And then what thing did he command them to do? If you ask what thing is that, the answer is going to be a noun. So this is a noun clause. What follows is a noun clause because it's answering the question, what? What did he command them? What did he command them to do? What thing? That's a noun. That's why we call this a noun clause or a substantive clause of purpose. What was the purpose? His wish for commanding them. What was the thing that he wanted? He, in this case, did not want. He did not want them to do a thing. He ordered them, commanded them to not do a thing, lest, best translation of ne is lest quod omnino tellum, quod modifies tellum, accusative, singular, neuter, direct object. It's going to be any tellum weapon. Omnino is the adverb form of omnis omne. So if omnis omne is all, the adverb form is alli. No, you can say wholly or totally, entirely. You can say altogether. Here it's probably best when it's linked with this quote here to say something like the English whatsoever. Whatsoever weapon. In hostes, in plus the accusative hostes, upon the enemy. You know, the guys who are the equites that are, approaching them and galloping towards them, upon those guys. Reicerent, just as they are coicere, the bad guys are coicere, they are casting, throwing stones and weapons. Reicerent, Caesar orders them not to iaccio reicere, to throw, quod omnino tellum, any weapon whatsoever in hostes upon the enemy. What did he order them? This whole thing. Ne, quod omnino tellum in hostes reicerent. This whole thing. It's like one big long accusative, one big long object of this verb. However, it's not an indirect statement, it's an indirect command, a substantive clause of purpose. So Caesar finished speaking, he made an end of speaking, he retreated to his own men, and he ordered his men not to throw back any weapon whatsoever upon the enemy. Nam etsi sine ullo periculo legionis delectae, cum equitatu proelium fore videbat, tamen comitendum non putabat, ut, pulsis hostibus, dici posset eos ab se perfidem in colloquio circumventos. Nam, back in nam, for, F-O-R, explanatory conjunction, for, etsi is et and si, and if, or even if, for even if. This etsi, this even if, will be picked up by this tamen. So, even if, although, nevertheless, even if, although, tamen, nevertheless, for even if, sine, preposition without, takes the ablative, ullo, from ullus any, agrees with periculo, from periculum e neuter, danger, peril, risk, hazard, and legionis delecti, legionis, legio, legionis, feminine, legion, this is the genitive form, delecti, agrees with legionis, this is an objective genitive. It limits the meaning of periculo. It looks like without any danger of his chosen legion, we're going to translate it as any danger to his chosen legion. These are objective genitives. Objective genitive working with periculo. Delecti comes from deligo, deligere, delegi, delectus, to delegate, to pick, to choose out. So this is delecti. Fourth principal part, delecti, his legion having been chosen, his chosen legion. So it's participle, but it's really doing a lot of adjective lifting here. For although without any danger to his chosen legion. Remember, he picked out his favorite legion, the 10th. He promoted them, quotes, promoted them to cavalry officers so they could mount horses and act as Caesar's Praetorian Guard during the colloquium, during the parley. So this is in reference to these 10th Legion guys. Caesar puts a lot of faith and trust into them. Yeah, this is actually going to be no danger to his chosen men. No. Caesar's chosen well. There will be no danger to them here. Cum equitatu, cum plus the ablative, preposition with, equitatu. It's a fourth declension noun, equitatus, us, masculine. It means horse, as in like the whole cavalry corps. So with the cavalry, it means the enemy cavalry, the enemy horse. Proelium e neuter, battle, nominative or accusative. It's going to be accusative. And fore is an awesome word. Fore is the alternative short form of futurus esse. So it stands in for a future active infinitive of sum esse fui futurus. Yeah, even the Romans get tired of writing futurus esse. So you get fore. And it just shows up as fore. It just shows up as fore. And then videbat, third person singular, imperfect, active, indicative of video, videre, vidi, visus. For although videbat, he was seen. He saw it. Although he saw that, what did he see? All this stuff. All this stuff neatly snuggled, nestled in between. Although he saw that a battle, a proelium, the subject accusative of the indirect statement, fore would be. This fore is standing in for a futurum esse. Futurum, to agree with proelium esse, would be, because it's a past tense introductory head verb, we need a future infinitive to be a subsequent action. So in the past, Caesar saw, like as this was happening, as these guys are galloping towards them, Caesar looked out there and he saw that, oh yeah, this battle would not be any danger. this battle would be without any danger, or this battle with the cavalry, with the enemy's horse, would be without any danger to his chosen legion. Yeah, even though, although he saw that, Tommen, nevertheless, we could beat them. I'm not worried about my chosen men. I'm not worried about my legion. They can handle themselves. The battle would be without any danger, hazard, or risk to them. They'll be fine. Nevertheless, committendum non putabat. Committendum, gnarly ND thingy. This is a passive paraphrastic. There is an implied form of sum working here. It's going to be esse, because this is a very small indirect statement. So it's committendum esse. Non putabat is going to introduce this indirect statement that comes before it. Non adverb not, putabat from puto, putare, putavi, putatus. Third person singular, imperfect, active, indicative. Nevertheless, he was not thinking. It's kind of coordinate with videbat. Although he was seeing this, nevertheless, he was not thinking. The imperfect gives a sense that some thought went behind this. Some calculation. The split second that Caesar had while what to do while the enemy's galloping towards him. Put it in the imperfect. Because he really thought about it. Nevertheless, he did not think that it, this is a neuter, it, committendum esse, passive paraphrastic, must be joined, must be proilium, it's referring to proilium committere, to join battle, to start a battle. He did not think to start the battle. He did not think that battle must be started, that battle must be joined. For although he saw that a battle with the enemy's cavalry would be without any danger to his chosen legion, nevertheless, he did not think that battle must be joined. Why would that be, Caesar? Ut. So perhaps we'll get some sort of explanation as to his purpose, what he wants to have, or maybe some sort of result. Ut, with the result that pulsis hostibus, or so that, pulsis hostibus, this ablative absolute right here, hostibus, ablative of hostis, masculine, an enemy. Pulsis comes from pello, pellere, puli, pulsus, to strike, hit, beat. So here with hostibus, it's going to mean like beaten or routed, like an enemy routs in battle. They turn, they flee. So with the noun participle, with the noun having been verbed, because it's a perfect passive participle, fourth principal part of the verb, with the enemy having been beaten, with the enemy having been routed, and then from that rough translation, that training wheels translation, you can get temporal clauses like after the enemy had been routed, when the enemy had been routed. You can get causal clauses, since the enemy had been routed, because the enemy had been routed. You can get concessive clauses, like although the enemy had been routed. You could even get conditional clauses, if the enemy had been routed. And actually, this might be a good place for a conditional. If the enemy had been routed. With the enemy having been routed. Dici posset. It posset might be able, dici, to be said. Present passive infinitive of dico, dicere, dixi, dictus. To form the present passive, you would take the present active dicere, because it's a third conjugation, and chop off the ere, get an I, dici. Posset from possum, posse, possui, or potui, third person singular, imperfect, active, indicative. So it might be said that, and then dici is going to introduce us to this indirect statement here. So he didn't think that battle must be joined, so that if the enemy had been beaten, if the enemy were beaten, it might be able to be said that eos, They, referring to the enemy, the accusative plural subject of the indirect statement. Ab, preposition from, away from, or it could be the by with the ablative, personal agent, as it is here. So ablative of personal agent, say being the ablative, refers to the subject Caesar. Perfidem, you should take together, and if you put them together, you can kind of see the an English word perfidy, which means a breach of faith, a breach of trust. Perfidy you can just translate as treacherously, with treachery. Go ahead and look up perfidy. Google it. Read about it. It's quite a thing. It is actually a thing, and that's pretty much what we're talking about here. Such as inviting someone to a place, like inviting an enemy somewhere so that you can have a parlay, a colloquium, a talk, negotiations, just sort of talk things out. And when your enemy shows up, instead of actually honoring the truce, the armistice that you've set up so you can have this parlay, you, for instance, kill them. Like drone strike them or something like that. You don't show up, but instead you shoot missiles at it from a drone. Like, something like that. That would be perfidy. And that's kind of what we're describing here. So that if the enemy might be beaten, if the enemy were routed, it might be able to be said that they, the enemy, by Caesar, by him, treacherously, through perfidy, and actually perfidy is a good word to use here, just go ahead and use that one, through perfidy, in colloquio, in the parlay, circumventos, and here's your verb inside this indirect statement, because it's an infinitive. It's just missing the essay. The essay is implied. It's a perfect passive infinitive, circumventos. That's the accusative plural masculine to go with the eos. So circumventos essay, they, the enemy, circumventos, had been surrounded, had been encircled. So encircled by whom? By Caesar, treacherously, through perfidy, perfidiously, that they had been perfidiously surrounded by Caesar during the conference. That might be able to be said if the enemy had been defeated, had been routed. And that is why Caesar thought, it might be best not to join battle. Even though, if it should come to blows, even though if there is a battle, there's no problem here. There is no hazard to the picked legion. Excellent. For although he saw that a battle with the enemy's cavalry would be without any danger to his picked legion, nevertheless, he did not think that battle must be joined, so that if the enemy were to be routed, it might be able to be said that they had been perfidiously surrounded by him during the conference, during the parlay. Postea quam in vulgus militum elatum est, qua arrogantia in colloquio ariovistus usus, omni Gallia Romanis interdixisset, impetumque in nostros eius equites fecissent, eaque res colloquium ut diremisset, multo maior alacritas, studiumque pugnandi maius exercitui injectum est. Excellent Caesarian sentence. Postea quam, after this, afterwards, after all this hubbubaloo, in vulgus, in the commons, in the common talk. Vulgar just means common, like common people, the way the common people talk. Vulgar Latin was just common Latin, street Latin. So this is the talk of the soldiers. The common talk of the soldiers, that rough talk, the way that soldiers kind of talk in the Roman camp. Yeah, that way, the way they kind of, when the men get together around the campfire and to make their spelt grain porridge, and they talk the way that the gruff way in which they talk to each other. Did you hear what happened at the colloquium? The way those Germans treated our guys. In vulgus, in the common talk militum, remember this is genitive, of the soldiers, genitive plural, miles milites, third declension, masculine. Afterwards, in the common talk of the soldiers, elatum est, it was, elatum, from efero, efere, etuli, elatus. It was carried off. It was, you could say, related. After it was related to the common talk of the soldiers, qua arrogantia in colloquio ariovistus usus. Now we have a nominative ariovistus, so he's doing whatever the verb is. We have usus, a participle of utor, uti, ususum. So ariovistus, as a deponent verb, looks passive, translate as active, having used, having made use of. And here's the ablative. Qua, there's a macron there, I swear it. There's also one right here, an arrogantia. This is arrogance. Qua arrogantia. Qui quae quod, with arrogantia. This is the interrogative adjective. What arrogance? In colloquio, in the parley, in the conference, during the conference, ariovistus usus, having made use of. What is this? Why do we have this subjunctive interdixit here? Well, first we have omni Gallia. There's a macron here on Gallia. I swear it. Omni is going to be the ablative of omnis, omne, all, every, agreeing with Gallia, I feminine, Gaul. So the ablative going with interdixit. Interdixit takes a dative, Romanis, but it also takes an ablative, because interdico, interdicere, interdixi, interdictus means to forbid, to put an interdict on something. So you forbid someone in the dative, like the Romanis, the dative Romans, from an ablative, and it's technically an ablative of separation, it just lacks the preposition, from all Gaul, from every corner of Gaul, from all Gaul, all of it. And then he also first, usus, made use of, employed, qua arrogantia, arrogance. How much arrogance? Some arrogance. And that's the question. Qua arrogantia. How arrogantly, how much arrogance Ariovistus used during the conference. And he interdixit, forbade the Romans from all Gaul. Ariovistus, that arrogant German, he told our guys that we had to get out of Gaul. He told the Romans that they had no place in Gaul. And the Romans kind of feel like Gaul might be theirs. Or at least Caesar has made that argument, and he might start convincing Romans that they believe that. So after it was relayed into the common talk of the soldiers, with what arrogance Ariovistus used during the conference and forbade the Romans from all of Gaul, and he impetum in nostros eos equites fecissit, and his equites, eos equites, eos pronoun genitive standing in for Ariovistus, so Ariovisti equites. For Ariovistus, his knights had facio facere feci factus fecissent, made an attack upon our men. This is all the stuff that the soldiers are saying to each other, all the stuff that was told to the soldiers, and now the soldiers are talking around the campfires. With what arrogance Ariovistus used during the conference, how he forbade the Romans from all of Gaul, and he had made an attack, his knights had made an attack upon our men. Eaque res, and ea res. And this thing, this matter, this affair, this incident, I could say using context, because what are we talking about? What is the res? What is the stuff? It's that the cavalry of the enemy had made an attack upon our dudes. And that thing, that very thing, that incident, how ut it had diremiset colloquium. Colloquium is the accusative direct object of diremiset, third person singular pluperfect active subjunctive. It had derailed. How this incident, the subject, had derailed the parley, had derailed the conference. All this stuff, after all this stuff had been relayed to the common talk of the soldiers, with what arrogance Ariovistus had made use of in the parley, how he had forbade the Romans from all of Gaul. His knights had attacked our men, had made an attack upon our men, and the matter had, and this incident had derailed the conference. All of these things are pluperfect subjunctive, and pluperfect subjunctive, because they're all indirect questions. Qua arrogantia. What arrogance did Ariovistus use in the conference? Tanta arrogantia. A lot, so much, so great arrogance. Multo. And after that had been related to the soldiers, what then happened? Multo maior alacritas, studiumque pugnandi maius exercitui injectum est. Multo. It's your favorite ablative. That's right, the ablative of degree of difference. Goes with the comparative maior to show what's the degree of difference. How much greater maior is this alacritas? Is it paulo, a little bit, or is it multo, much, by much? A greater by much. In English we would just say much greater. I see mucho maior, so much greater. Mucho greater. It's just like mucho greater. It's much greater. Alacritas. Hopefully you see the English word alacrity, which describes not just speed, but also enthusiasm. Alacrity. Go ahead and use the English word here. Alacrity. Straight from the Latin. Alacritas. See that tas suffix? Turn that into the English T. Alacrity. Maior alacritas. That I becomes that consonantal I becomes a J in the Middle Ages. So major alacrity. Much greater alacrity. Much greater alacrity. Studiumque. The que links alacritas with studium closely. Studium, somewhat a synonym with alacritas. Zeal, enthusiasm. That's what you study, right? What you study is what you have zeal, enthusiasm for. When you study, you are very enthusiastic. I know you are. Pugnandi, like the finem loquendi, an end of speaking, we have pugnandi. That's a studium pugnandi, a zeal of fighting, a genitive gerund. There is no object of the fighting. If it were a zeal of fighting the enemy, then you would have both pugnandi, you'd have it would be genitive plural, and it would have hostes, so it would be pugnandorum hostium. A studiumque pugnandorum hostium, a zeal of fighting the enemy, where both agree with each other because a gerundive is a verbal adjective. We don't have that here. We have a gerund, verbal noun. It's in the genitive. A zeal of fighting, of doing the thing, and that zeal is maius. We have kind of a cool chiasmus here, and I'll explain this more in class, but we have adjective, noun, and then noun, adjective. And when you put them in a certain arrangement, so adjective, noun, and then noun, adjective, and the way that the adjectives link up and the way that the nouns link up, it makes an X, the Greek letter chi. This is called chiasmus, and it's considered an extremely elegant order of words to draw strong contrast or to show emphasis. So we want to really emphasize how much alacrity and how zealous these Roman soldiers got when they heard about what happened to their fellow Roman soldiers when they were protecting their general, their imperator, from the savage Germans. Maius is neuter because it goes with studium. Maior is feminine because it goes with alacritas, hence the difference of forms. So Maius neuter, a greater zeal. So it's greater alacrity and greater zeal of fighting. Exercitui is dative to go with injectum. Injectum es, it's injicior. So we've had quite a few iacios. We've had a coicere, we've had a reicere, and now we have an inicere, to throw into or to inject. So, or to infuse. So was infused. Notice it should go with the alacritas via sense, a constructio ad sensum. However, it really only grammatically injectum, agrees with studium. This is called zeugma, which is the Greek word for yoke, a yoking or a joining. It's joined only with the closest thing, whereas construction according to sense, constructio ad sensum, it also goes with alacritas, because they're linked closely together by the conjunction. And a greater zeal of fighting was infused into the dative army. They got really excited to fight the Germans now.